Welcome to This Explainer. If you're a focused learner trying to cut through the noise and grab hold of some truly life-changing ideas, well, you're in exactly the right place. Today, we're diving into Ralph Waldo Emerson's legendary 1841 essay, Self-Reliance. Now, I know 1841 sounds like ancient history, right? But please don't look at this as some dusty old relic. What we're covering today is actually a fiercely modern, dynamic survival guide against groupthink, conformity, and external pressure. It's literally a roadmap to finding your own internal compass. Okay, let's dive into this. To make Emerson's brilliant ideas actionable, we're going to cover 5 key pillars: trust your own genius, the conspiracy of society, the trap of consistency, intuition over tradition, and finally, finding true self-reliance. We're moving from that ambitious internal spark all the way to unshakable freedom. Let's kick things off with Pillar 1, trust your own genius, or discovering your inner voice. And get ready, because Emerson is about to completely redefine the very concept of what it actually means to be a genius. Emerson shifts genius entirely away from, acing a high IQ test or flaunting external intellect. Instead, he defines it as pure internal conviction. Genius is believing that what is true for you in your private heart is true for all men. He points out this really heartbreaking truth about human nature. We constantly detect that little gleam of light flashing across our minds, but we just dismiss our own thoughts without a second glance simply because they're ours. We assume they can't possibly be valuable. But Emerson argues that in every great work of genius, we actually recognize our own rejected thoughts coming back to us with a certain alienated majesty. Which brings us to one of his most absolute, powerful anchors. He says, there is a time in every man's education when he arrives at the conviction that envy is ignorance, that imitation is suicide. Think about that for a second. It's like looking into a mirror. In our modern world, we are constantly caught in this trap of seeking validation by imitating others, scrolling our feeds, copying the latest trends. But Emerson is telling us that imitating someone else is literally killing your own unique potential. No nourishing corn can come to you except through the specific plot of ground you were giving to till. Now, what's really interesting about this next point is how Emerson illustrates this loss of independence by contrasting a young boy with an adult man. Think about an independent boy sitting in a theater. He's genuinely judging things purely on their merits, right? He gives an independent, totally unapologetic verdict without worrying for a second about what anyone else thinks. But the adult man? Well, as soon as he acts or speaks, he is, as Emerson puts it, clapped into jail by his consciousness. He's constantly watched by the sympathy or hatred of society, constantly doing the math on how his actions affect his standing. And that leads us directly into Pillar 2, the conspiracy of society, or the battle against conformity. This is where the stakes get incredibly high. It's the ultimate battle between the individual and the world around them. Emerson radically redefines society as a joint stock company, where members basically agree to surrender their liberty and culture just to secure bread for each shareholder. The virtue this company demands above all else is conformity. It doesn't love realities and creators, it loves names and customs. Society forces us into what Emerson brilliantly calls the foolish face of praise. That forced, tight smile we plaster on just to go along with the crowd, kind of like nodding your way through a terrible corporate Zoom meeting. Because of that, we arrive at this incredibly bold statement: whoso would be a man must be a nonconformist. Now, Emerson isn't talking about joining some specific political faction or just rebelling for the sake of being edgy. He's making a universal point that to be truly good, you have to explore if something is actually good, rather than just caving to society's badges or conforming to dead institutions. He takes this critique a step further by breaking down what he sees as false charities and virtues, things like malicious popular charities, educating fools at college, building meeting houses out of vanity, or doing virtues just as penances or apologies. Why? Because way too often, people perform good actions the exact same way they'd pay a parking ticket. Their virtues are just apologies for living in the world, done entirely for external show. Emerson wants your life to be genuine and equal, lived for itself, not for some grand spectacle. He demands intrinsic integrity, not performative goodness. Okay, let's move to Pillar 3, the trap of consistency, which is all about freeing yourself from your past. If society is the first terror that scares us away from trusting ourselves, our paralyzing reverence for our own past acts and words is absolutely the second. So the crucial point here is captured in this incredibly famous quote: "A foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds, adored by little statesmen and philosophers and divines." Emerson asks a really penetrating question. Why should you keep looking over your shoulder? Why drag around this corpse of your memory just so you don't contradict something you happened to say yesterday? It's like being held hostage by an embarrassing old post on the internet. We are so terrified of disappointing people who use our past acts to compute our orbit that we end up denying our present truth.
Look, if you're afraid of contradicting yourself and being misunderstood, you're actually in spectacular company. Pythagoras, Socrates, Jesus, Galileo, Newton. Every pure and wise spirit was heavily misunderstood. Emerson injects some serious energy here. Speak what you think right now in hard words, and tomorrow speak what tomorrow thinks in hard words, even if it completely contradicts everything you said today. To be great is to be misunderstood.
This shift brings us to Pillar 4, intuition over tradition, or living in the present. This is where we uncover the true source of self-reliance, which Emerson identifies as spontaneity, instinct, and living fiercely in the present moment. And this brilliantly illustrates his whole philosophy. Emerson compares humanity to a simple rose. The roses outside his window, they don't reference former roses or try to be better ones. They just exist perfectly with God today. There is no time to them. A rose is perfectly self-reliant in every single moment of its existence. But man, we're timid and apologetic. We constantly postpone our lives. We don't live in the present, but with a reverted eye, we lament the past, or we stand on tiptoe trying to foresee the future. We can never be happy and strong until we live with nature right now in the present. He views our obsession with tradition as highly damaging. He says, history is an impertinence and an injury if it be anything more than a cheerful apologue or parable of my being and becoming. Emerson passionately argues that the centuries of history are literally conspirators against the sanity and authority of your own soul. When someone claims to speak of God but tries to drag you backward to the phraseology of some old, moldered nation, Emerson says, do not believe them. The acorn is not better than the oak. We absolutely have to stop worshiping the past. Now the intensity really escalates as we enter our final pillar, finding true self-reliance, escaping those external traps. Here, Emerson examines the very specific, everyday traps where society successfully forces us to look outward instead of inward. Let's move to and see how this builds into what he calls symptoms of intellectual unsoundness. This is where we surrender our power to external things. We get caught up in the superstition of traveling, we imitate foreign tastes in our education and art, we rely blindly on property and governments to protect us, and we have this slavish respect for crowds, numbers, and political parties. In all these ways, our minds just become vagabonds. Take travel, for instance. It's this universal modern desire to escape our problems by changing our scenery. But Emerson calls this a fool's paradise. He writes, I pack my trunk, wake up in Naples, and there beside me is the stern fact, the sad self, unrelenting, identical, that I fled from. You can seek out the Vatican or the grand palaces, hoping to lose your sadness, but your giant goes with you wherever you go. The truly wise person stays at home in their own soul. And the exact same trap applies to property. We constantly measure each other by what we have, not by what we are. But relying on accidental property, things gained by inheritance, a gift, or just plain luck, is a weakness, because a storm or a mob can take it all away in a second. Instead, what a man inherently is acquires living property. True self-reliance deals with internal cause and effect, not gambling and spinning the wheel of chance with the gifts of fortune. And that brings us to the ultimate realization of this entire explainer. This is the emotional climax of Emerson's philosophy. Nothing can bring you peace but yourself. Nothing can bring you peace but the triumph of principles. You are literally the only one who can absolve yourself to yourself. When you throw off foreign support, when you stand alone, trusting your own thought, you instantly command your limbs and you can work miracles. So I'm going to leave you with this final provocative question to chew on. Are you living as an original creator of your life, boldly speaking your truth today? Or are you living merely as a shareholder in society's joint stock company, trading your liberty and culture just to fit in and conform? The choice is entirely yours. Thanks so much for joining me in this explainer, and I really hope this empowers you to trust that iron string vibrating in your own heart.